television audience. I made my mistakes. But in all of my years of public life, I have never profited from public service. I've earned every cent. And in all of my years of public life, I have never obstructed justice. And I think, too, that I can say that in my years of public life, that I welcome this kind of examination, because people have got to know whether or not their president's a crook. Well, I'm not a crook. I've earned everything I've got.
Nixon should have hired a president. He didn't like people. He was socially awkward and an introvert, and in many instances paranoid, doubting of his own shadow. He didn't come from a powerful or influential family like the Kennedys, yet he was in charge of an entire nation. Nixon survived every defeat no matter what. He reinvented himself so many times that it's impossible to count. Today's generation remember him as the one who resigned from the office.
Good evening. This is the 37th time I have spoken to you from this office, where so many decisions have been made that shaped the history of this nation. Each time I have done so to discuss with you some matter that I believe affected the national interest. In all the decisions I have made in my public life, I have always tried to do what was best for the nation.
But there is more of Nixon than history books teach. Around that time, women were still treated with high levels of discrimination, as there was nothing to prohibit federal programs from discriminating against people purely on the basis of their gender. Although this state-sanctioned sexism manifested itself in all sorts of everyday activities, it was most acute in the field of sport. There was almost no funding available for women's sport teams prior to 1972, until the Title IX came along and changed everything. Signed into law by Nixon in June of that same year, the Title IX made it illegal for federally funded education programs to discriminate based on sex. The situation in the South was also a complicated issue in terms of racial equality. By 1970, 7 states still enforced segregated schooling, a move that broke 2 Supreme Court rulings and seemed to set the states on a collision course with the rest of the Union. It seems impossible to imagine now, but back then it seemed like something as simple as equality might really spark off a kind of guerrilla civil war. People were predicting riots, blood flowing through the streets, children murdered on their way to school. In short, it could have been a humanitarian disaster. Then Nixon stepped in. Along with a couple of close advisors, America's most lamented president met with legislators from all 7 southern states, even traveling down to Louisiana to allay people's fears. Over several months, he did everything in his power to make sure segregation would not only be stamped out, but that it died peacefully, and it worked. Segregation vanished in education, and not a drop of blood was spilled. Nixon probably did more for the segregation than all previous administrations combined, and he did it without sending the country spiraling into civil war. There was one aspect that Nixon loved about being president, and that was international politics. One of his biggest achievements was the opening of diplomatic relationships with the People's Republic of China, after an American table tennis team was invited to the country.
The Army decided that I should be on the All-America Ping Pong team. We were the first Americans to visit the land of China in like a million years or something like that. Somebody said world peace was in our hands.
Nixon took the opportunity to travel and arrange meetings with Chinese officials. His trip to the Asian country was heavily publicized, securing an important victory which gave birth to a new political Nixon. Only Nixon could go to China. After ending the involvement of American troops in the Vietnam War and taking the lead in environmental legislation by creating the Environmental Protection Agency and pushing through the National Environmental Policy Act, known today as the Magna Carta of the Environment, Nixon was rather quite popular and was re-elected by one of the largest landslides in US history. However, 1973 saw a continuing series of revelations about the Watergate scandal. The scandal escalated, costing Nixon much of his political support, and on August 9, 1974, he resigned in the face of almost certain impeachment and removal from office. Nixon made his mistakes, and perhaps those will be his legacy. But it is important to acknowledge his achievements as well, recognize when he won something further. His achievements may seem minimal to most, but for those who were benefited by his policies, they were important victories after long, long battles.
In leaving it, I do so with this prayer. May God's grace be with you in all the days ahead.